we are. It's actually afternoon now. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. So we've just had a really great first half hour talking about a very wonderful subject, and we're about to dive in again. And remember, the reason that we're here and the reason that we're talking is because we're really committed to transferring empowerment, creating empowerment in our own lives as well, but transferring empowerment to anyone who would be listening, to what we're talking about. And in the meantime, hopefully, when you move on and have been edified by even one sentence that we have said, it will, arouse you to have conversations with folks around you in a deeper and possibly meaningful way that allows you to move beyond the Facebook memes of most of our lives. And so, having said that, we're now moving into our second half hour, and we've got Vanessa and Ken and Lisa. And Lisa, did you want to kick us off this half hour with choosing the word and the topic that we're going to be chatting about?
Well, pertaining to edification, somewhat was talking about the sharing of knowledge, and I thought there has to be a quote or a poem or something that says, "What is knowledge without sharing?" So I wanted to throw that out there and see if anybody A, remembered a quote, or B, if there's any value in not sharing knowledge.
Interesting. So here's where we're all scrambling to get that quote, and at the same time, the topic is going to be let's make it sharing, okay? For example, the whole idea of edifying is I say that this is a good thing. The intention is to uplift the person who is learning and to bring that learner to the same level, not, impress the learner by your skill and your savvy and all the rest of that, but to share and propagate this cultural, phenomenon, called whatever the subject is that you're edifying. So the sharing, wow, tell you what, there's lots there. And would you like to say some more, Lisa?
Would I like what?
Would you like to say more?
No, I thought I'd throw it out there. I personally, I'm sure, if you want to dive deep, like sharing evil might not be beneficial, but I wasn't thinking in those terms. But
well,
what's the purpose of purpose of gaining knowledge without?
So let me see if this kind of, this helps, okay? Knowledge not shared is knowledge wasted.
True. Right.
So if knowledge comes to a screeching halt with a person and it's not shared with anybody else, it's valueless in terms of the culture. It's valueless in terms of that person's life. What if?
Anybody else have a thought? I see Ken's wheels turning.
Yeah, well, no, it's just interesting. There's a couple of years back we had a conversation about the language involved in using the word teaching versus using the word sharing, and it was actually it was a continuation of, as in our martial arts school, we were always instructors. That was the term that was used. And we shifted that to teacher, mainly because our job wasn't to instruct. It wasn't telling people what to do. It was helping them learn, So, and the interesting thing is, especially as kind of looking at this transition we're going through from, industrial education to 21st century learning modalities, all the project-based stuff and everything, the idea of teacher versus sharing, we started coming up because there's a different power dynamic. Like a lot of times teacher can feel like we were talking in the first session, I know something that I am now going to impart and bestow upon you. This feeling of, one person at a higher level than the other. Whereas when you share something, you remove that power dynamic. You may have information that the other person doesn't, but you're just sharing it to start the mental alchemy process that we talked about. So, and it was really interesting because what it led to was we had kind of these three cornerstones of a good classroom, and one was your teaching skills, one was your communication skills, your ability to deliver. And then the third one was basically like classroom management, like keeping control of your class, especially working with kids. And that conversation led to us changing that language and approach to moving from a teacher to an awakened guide, someone who's just walked that path a little bit more and is paying very close attention to sharing what they've learned, but also how that's received by the learner. Communication became conversational learning. So it was two directional instead of just how well you can get your message delivered to the other person. And classroom management shifted to focused attention. How do you design an environment that makes it easier for the person to learn? And it all came from that word, that shift from teaching to sharing. So interesting stuff. For us, it was anyway.
Is it a good idea to go back and see if we can, put some nouns and verbs around the word knowledge? I'm looking at it as a noun, and it's facts, information, and skills acquired by a person through experience or education. So there's an implicit, I'm inferring learning there, the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. And like, for instance, a thirst for knowledge means that it may be somewhat indistinct. However, there's a target. There's a target that it's an additive process or is some sort of a mathematical way to increase the size or the mass, of mastery in a particular area by acquiring, more facts, information, and skills. So that's kind of a neat thing. We're talking experience or education in this particular definition. Then there's another one which basically says knowledge is a familiarity, awareness, or understanding of someone or something, such as facts, skills, or objects. And by most accounts, knowledge can be acquired in many different ways and from many different sources, including but not limited to perception, reason, memory, testimony, scientific inquiry, education, and practice. And there's your curious mind again. So the whole thing starts with a question. And what else? And now what? And then what?
Right.
And then what happens? Pretty interesting stuff.
For the classic 3-year-old, why?
With the ability to use 5 other words that are not why.
Right,
What,
right.
when, where, and how.
Yeah.
So here's a question.
Yes.
We're coming out of an age of material consumerism, like, buying stuff, more stuff. Oh, there's the latest model. There's another color of the same stuff, whatever it is. And that seems to be kind of, people are definitely moving a little bit more towards minimalists and essentialism and that kind of thing. Because of the mass availability of information, are we starting to become consumers of knowledge just for the sake of consuming it?
I think there's an argument that there's always been a class of people that were in that, that was their thing. And I'm not quite sure I agree with you based on Amazon sales and deliveries, whether or not we've actually transitioned out of any consumerism of stuff. I got to tell you, anybody that pays $2,400 for a smartphone, just because it'll open up and give you a larger, screen to see your memes and posts and Instagram stuff, I'm not sure that any generalization that we could make about learning right now transfers into a significant portion of the population any longer. I'm wondering what's going to show up after the last 12 months with COVID and the abject failures of the teaching model to be recreated in anything other than a classroom setting. By all accounts that I've seen, and again, I don't know that much about it, but I've talked to some teachers, I've talked to folks that have been on the distance learning model, and they have basically said this was a complete failure, that kids lost at least a half a grade worth of they lost the foundation that they had going into after Christmas from last year. So I'm really kind of interested, Ken, in the consumerism, analogy that you're making. I think is a really, really good one, because there are also people that are buying online applications to get quotes from the old days, or to get, all of the works of Wayne Dyer, or all of the works of Tony Robbins, or, I mean, a lot of this stuff is public domain now because they don't care anymore. Their business model looks different than it did 20 years ago. So, there's almost an overwhelming amount of data out there that people could consume on a regular basis. We have this podcast, which now has somewhere upwards of 50 hours worth of content. Will that be consumed? I hope so.
Well, and I guess that, it's just kind of interesting. Like, I mean, I made a commitment back in 1993 that it's been pretty steady to read 50 books a year, and I've pretty much done that, for like 25 years. And there have been times where I didn't reach that mark, and it was mainly because I was starting to feel like I was reading for the sake of reading, not so that I could apply what I was learning, like manifest it and bring some value. It was always directed at value or being able to share, in a way that would be helpful to others. So it was this kind of dance where, and I think about a lot of the arguments and debates, whether it's politics or masks or vaccines or whatever. And there's a lot of people, when you see it, especially on social media, they've sucked in a bunch of knowledge that defends a position, and they're just ready to shoot it out at you. They got the links, they got the research, just blah, 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 blah. So they're not really having dialogue about what it all means and where we should go with it. They just pulled in a bunch of information that supports whatever view they're currently holding, and so it just kind of struck me. And honestly, if you do some research, Bill, it's kind of interesting. There's more and more like a reductionist approach to housing, like smaller modular housing, and there's all kinds of like movement towards minimalism. So although Amazon may not be showing it, I think there is a growing group, especially of younger people that I talk to, who are less interested in buying stuff and much more interested in having experiences, traveling, being socially conscious. There's I just article on it. It's conscientious capitalism. So, and actually I was just talking to a professor at Wesley University who's teaching a startup course for people who want to do like Patagonia. They want to be in business in a way that's socially responsible. So I think there is a movement there. We'll see.
We called them hippies, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
These were people who, Timothy Leary said, tune in, turn on, and drop out. Go do the commune. Yep. The model for it is, the Israeli kibbutz. You do have a way that everybody can live in the same environment with next to nothing. And so I'm not arguing with you for any other reason that I would like to see a trend towards minimalism. However, when I look at what's going on in the stock market with cryptocurrency, with all of these things that I consider to be equivalent with stuff, those people that are minimalists in some area of their life are actually not investing wisely in terms of things that have intrinsic value. and we talked about this before. I have $250 riding on cryptocurrency these days, and I'm watching 3 different vehicles, and there is nothing there. It's like, Ken, you can create a cryptocurrency and people will buy it, okay? Lisa, you can create a cryptocurrency and people will buy it. And these are people that are attempting to they're shifting possibly from buying a new Tesla, but there's a 6-month waiting list for Teslas as well. So what I'm saying to you, Ken, is that when you see a pocket of people that are exhibiting a particular behavior, is it really representative of a mass, or are we talking 3 to 5% of the population? I don't know. That's what I'm saying to you. But based on what people are doing and how they're spending their money and the things that they're investing in that have no intrinsic value, I'm not sure. That's all I'm saying.
And you always have that, there's that, 5 to 10% early adopters that, are out there in the forefront testing whatever it is or experimenting, and and some things gain traction and they move into the bell-shaped curve of what most people do, and then you always have the long tail on the other end of just all the various things that are out there. Yeah, and so I don't know the answer. I mean, just even the some of the things I've read about the cryptocurrency thing, I know there's a lot of people that are seeing it more as just they don't like the way our current financial, like the way the banks control the finances, the way money, they're like trying to reinvent currency. So, and free us from, the control of the banks. I mean, it's fascinating when you find out how many, it's something like $70 billion a year is collected in overdraft fees. So basically there's all of this money that gets taken from people who don't have enough money,
Right.
and that's so people get frustrated. You look at even the subreddit group that blew up GameStop. They only did that. They didn't care about making money on GameStop. In fact, most of them made decisions that weren't about making money. What they were doing was, it was kind of like the Occupy Wall Street thing. It was we don't like the way the stock market game is played by the big boys, so we're going to be crazy and try to blow this system up. So that was the conversation anyway going on.
Well, there's many levels to every conversation, and however, I got to tell you, having been involved with it, it was about making money. This was about bankrupting hedge funds. This was totally about when somebody shorts a stock, they're basically betting that its value is going to go down. So that when somebody hears that a stock's been shorted by $1 billion hedge fund, and you go in and start buying that stock, guess what? You have to own the stock in order to sell it. So that means they had to buy the stock at a higher price than what they started off with, which means those people that were in the market selling were now making double and triple the money that they put in 2 days, So, and it's a very exciting story when somebody finds a loophole, So my intent in all of this is I want you all to know, I'm going on record right now. My newer car is a 2008 Honda Odyssey with 167,000 miles on it. I ain't into stuff, okay? I got more stuff than I'm ever going to need. I'm at the point in my life where I'm giving stuff away. I just want to find some other people, and I love what you're saying, Ken, if one person hears this podcast and says, I need to really take a look at what I'm up to in my life. Am I part of the group that's being led by mass marketing? Or can I be a contrarian? Can I be like my own person in charge of my own destiny, making my own, my own shots in life? And you watch the headlines. Where's the truth? Where's the substance? Sorry, I got my button pushed, and I've been, truth be told, in 72, I could have been a hippie. I mean, there was only one thing in the way of my becoming a full-fledged hippie, and that was my dad.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Actually, mine
you
too.
know, the whole Ben and Jerry route and all of the sustainable and all the cool things that have come out after that. And unfortunately, what I think that's all been co-opted by major brands, especially the banks, you know, led by Elon Musk, who just put something like, I don't know, some ungodly amount of billions of dollars into cryptocurrency. Bank of America. You've got all these monetary platforms that are now flocking to it, which is going to keep it nervous as all get out probably for the next 2 or 3 years till things settle down a little bit. So if you're not following it, there's a product called CELO, which is going to be currency for the third world countries. And it is a crypto, and it is actually selling in the neighborhood of $3.50 to $5.50 per share. So if you're not one of those really neat people that can buy a bunch of shares of Bitcoin at $52,000 to $59,000 a share, this would allow you to play in that arena and have some fun watching it go up and down.
So you're saying, Bill, it might be worth it to take a look at?
I would say, yeah, you need to know what's going on there with it. This is a big transformation, like when we went from having cash in our wallet to having plastic. This is a different deal entirely. And what Ken is talking about is the banks have to get involved with this, or they'll have no way of getting their net out to take any percentage of it, you know, from unsuspecting consumers.
How are you spelling that, Bill?
CELO.
Okay.
Cool.
And there's hundreds of these little, you know, they start off like penny stocks, but the more money that goes into them, I think when I first bought in, it was around $3.35 a share. I think it's up probably like $4.60 a share right now over the last 3 weeks. I've lost and gained as much as $20 over a 3-day period of having fun with this, just watching it. So
you're at the point you're kind of just having fun with it.
I am attempting to assimilate this knowledge. I am attempting to become edified by what are the people doing, you know?
Fun in the process. Sure. Definitely sounds serious. So as for the minimalism thing, I almost wonder if it's I know we're going back a little bit, but I almost wonder if it's a generation thing. I was watching a documentary the other day on millennials, and I'm not a millennial. My husband's not a millennial, but we're probably just before that generation. He's before, but it seems like millennials on a whole are the ones who are maybe more prone to minimalism. Maybe they're you know, they're more interested in I think, Bill, you were saying like they want to travel more. Maybe Ken was saying that they want to have experiences. They value experiences over things. But yeah, it's almost like maybe they're the modern day hippies. Maybe that's how the hippies were when you were growing up, Bill. You said you were kind of hippie too, or your dad prevented you. Did I hear that right? Anyway.
You took away the gist. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And as a matter of fact, though, my husband and I are minimalists. We've been kind of exploring that it's a lifestyle sort of idea. Although we're not into traveling, but I think that is the reason why a lot of millennials or others choose to get into minimalism. But in our case, we just for one. And for the other ages where I've read about why they would choose minimalism, they choose that lifestyle because it's just simpler. You know, if you have a lot of material possessions, well, you've got to worry in a way about each of those material possessions. You've got to care for each of those material possessions. You have a bunch of cars, you have to pay insurance on each of them, and repairs, and et cetera, et cetera. So and I know you mentioned smaller houses, Ken. As a matter of fact, in 2017, we took a trip down to New Jersey, and that's when I was really getting to like the extreme idea of the movement. And we went to something called a tiny house festival. And it was awesome. It was like $20 to get in. There was rain on the horizon. It was pretty packed. And where it was really packed was there were, I want to say maybe 25 or 30 tiny houses on display. And you could go into them like open houses, and they were all furnished and ready to go. Well, some of them were furnished and ready to go, most of them. And because it's so tiny, you could only let in, maybe 3 or 4 people at a time. But they would, the lines, we felt like we were in Disney World. Here we are in Western New Jersey in the middle of farmland, and we were at this tiny house festival, and there's tons of people there, and there's speakers and everything, and they're talking about the movement and the lifestyle and everything else. And they've got these tiny houses on display that you can wait in line to see. And some lines we were waiting, 45 minutes sometimes to get in to check out a little tiny house. So it was pretty popular. And I remember, or at least it was starting to grow in popularity. I remember there were a lot of, the speakers were saying, this is, it's buying back time for people. That's the one thing that we can't, that we're always losing out on. So it's buying back time, and it's allowing people, sometimes the tiny houses are on wheels, and so you can live in this part of the country for a few months, and you can live in another part of the country for a few months, and you don't like your neighbors, well, pick up and just wheel away. Mm-hmm. And then of course there were some legal ramifications with how are you going to, of course there's the issue of having someone live off the grid. You have, or there's the issue of having someone, again, be your neighbor, but then they're not really your neighbor because they could leave at any time. So a lot of towns were having issues like that. But and then they were talking about also tiny houses with for maybe to help with the homelessness cause or something like that. But the big reason was, why would someone want a tiny house? Is so they could, again, they just have a smaller home, so you don't have to pay for house cleaning, or you don't have to spend a Saturday cleaning your house, or and you're living in something that small. Of course, I know I'm giving that as a major example right now for minimalism, but that's not all that it pertains. But it's just, the point is you have less to take care of, and it just gives you back time, so you can spend that instead with people you love, or any other experiences. Maybe you're into sports or whatever the case, so it forces you to have less stuff.
We watched this marvelous movie about, I can't tell you the name of it. I can only tell you that the woman who played the primary character was also in the movie Fargo. She was a state police woman in the movie Fargo.
Frances Dorman. Did you watch Nomadland?
Yes.
Nomadland?
Yes. What a marvelous study of somebody whose very existence is uncomfortable by being in the creature comforts of somebody's house and bed after living in her van, for years and years. So there's, I watched my dad 25 years ago go through this, what he called simplification routine, that, he didn't want any loose ends in his life. Everything had to be simplified. I got to be able to start and finish something, within like a day. Otherwise, I'm not taking it on. So he loved golf. He could go and play 18 holes of golf in 3 or 4 hours, and then he was done with it. But if I gave him something, I gave him a $20 gold note from like 1912 or something of that nature for his 50th birthday. And the next time I saw him, he said, I've had this in the top drawer of my my dresser since I saw you the last time. And he said, it doesn't fit. He said, this isn't for me. This isn't, something that I need or want to have around. It's got value to it that I don't understand. I'm giving it back to you. So just really, like there's that, kind of a under the surface, between those two stories of, they just can't have it any other way other than, completely simple, minimalist, and nothing else in their way, and everything has always got a place, and everything is in its place. And if it gets
Yeah.
broken, it gets replaced immediately.
Yep.
It's very interesting. It's foreign to me. That's another whole story, but I completely appreciate and understand how it is for these folks. I think we all have an area of our life where we get a little bit kind of squirrely, or at least it seems squirrely to other people.
So you edify them.
Yes, exactly, Lisa. The power word of today. Today's show is brought to you by the word edify and the number 12.
Right.
All right. Anybody have any wrap-ups on this? Really good work, and thanks, Vanessa, for laying the table for us.
My pleasure. And then Lisa helped out too, because she helped out with the next segment, our following segment, this segment.
So share your knowledge.
Yes, and Ken has given me some work to go and research on this new emerging class of people and age group and all the rest of that of folks that are just not interested in getting onto the wagon train, interested in kind of doing their own thing, offbeat, offline, off grid, whatever. That's good stuff.
There's a good book called Essentialism. I can't remember the name of the author.
Greg
but
McKeown, or however you say
yeah,
his name.
McKeown, something like that.
NCKEOWN or something.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, it's not, minimalism's a little bit different. They're kind of related.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.